You've been looking for God in all the wrong places. Not because God is absent, but because God is too present. Rumi spent years seeking the divine until he made a discovery that ended his search forever. What you're looking for is what's looking. What you're seeking is what's seeking. And once you understand this, his spiritual search becomes unnecessary. His name was Jalal ad-Din Muhammad Rumi, but the world simply calls him Rumi. Born in 1207, he would become the most beloved mystic, poet in history. But what most people don't know is that Rumi's greatest teaching wasn't written in his poetry. It was lived through the most devastating spiritual crisis of his life. For 37 years, Rumi was a respected Islamic scholar. He taught theology, led prayers, gave sermons. He was learned, pious, accomplished. But something was missing. Despite all his knowledge about God, he had never actually encountered God. He was like a man who had studied water his entire life, but had never tasted it. Then, in 1244, everything changed. A wandering dervish named Shams of Tabriz arrived in Konya. Shams was wild, unpredictable, dangerous. He cared nothing for scholarly reputation or religious convention. He had only one interest, the direct experience of the divine. When Shams met Rumi, he asked him a question that shattered Rumi's entire world. Who was the greater mystic Abu Yazid al-Bistami, who said, "Glory be to me. How great is my majesty?" Or Muhammad, who said, "I do not know you as you should be known"? This wasn't just a theological question. Shams was pointing to the deepest paradox of spiritual seeking. Those who claim to have found God often reveal they haven't, while those who confess their ignorance may be closest to the truth. Rumi's scholarly mind tried to analyze the question, but Shams stopped him. The answer, Shams said, is not in your books. It's in your being. And in that moment, Rumi realized something that would change everything. He had been looking for God as if God were an object to be found, a destination to be reached, a knowledge to be acquired. But what if God wasn't hidden somewhere else? What if God wasn't even hidden at all? This is when Rumi discovered the secret that he would spend the rest of his life trying to express. God doesn't hide from you. You hide from God. But even more radical than that, your very hiding is God appearing as Hiddenn. Think about what this means. When you feel distant from the divine, that feeling of distance is itself a divine experience. When you long for God, that longing is God longing for God through you. When you search for meaning, that search is meaning searching for itself. Rumi put it this way: you are not just a drop in the ocean. You are the entire ocean in each drop. But here's where it gets even more mind-bending. Rumi realized that the seeker and the sought were never separate. The lover and the beloved were always one. Every moment of seeking was actually the divine playing hide and seek with itself. I searched for God and found only myself, Rumi wrote. I searched for myself and found only God. This isn't mystical poetry. This is the precise description of reality as Rumi came to see it. There is no separate self looking for God. There is only God appearing as a separate self, appearing to seek God, appearing to find God, appearing to lose God again. But why would the divine play such a game? Why would the infinite pretend to be finite? Why would the found pretend to be lost? Rumi's answer is simple: for the sake of love. Love is the bridge between you and everything, he said. But he didn't mean love as an emotion, or even love as a relationship. He meant love as the fundamental force of existence, the very reason why the one appears as many. Without otherness, there can be no love. Without separation, there can be no reunion. Without loss, there can be no finding. The divine creates the illusion of separation so that it can experience the ecstasy of union. But here's the secret within the secret. The separation was always an illusion. The union was always the reality. This is why Rumi could say something that sounds impossible. In your light, I learn how to love. In your beauty, how to make poems. You dance inside my chest where no one sees you, but sometimes I do, and that sight becomes this art, this music, this form. God isn't hidden in some distant heaven. God is dancing inside your chest. God is looking through your eyes. God is thinking your thoughts, feeling your feelings, experiencing your experiences. But if this is true, why don't we recognize it? Why? Do we feel separate? Why do we spend our lives searching for what we already are? Rumi discovered that this forgetfulness isn't a mistake. It's part of the divine plan. Sell your cleverness and buy bewilderment, he advised, because intellectual understanding can never grasp what you are. The mind can only know objects, but you are the subject, the awareness in which all objects appear. This is why Rumi eventually stopped studying and started dancing. This is why he began spinning in circles until he lost all sense of a separate self. In that whirling, the seeker dissolved and only the sought remained. The dancer disappeared and only the dance continued. When you do things from your soul, Rumi wrote, you feel a river moving in you, a joy. That river, that joy, it's not something you experience. That's what you are. You are the river of divine consciousness, temporarily forgetting your own. Nature, playing at being a separate wave, but the wave was never separate from the ocean. The ray of light was never separate from the sun. The thought was never separate from the mind thinking it. This is what Rumi meant when he said, you are the universe in ecstatic motion. The universe isn't something you're in. You are the universe. Not the personal you, but the real you, the consciousness that is aware of these very words right now. But here's where Rumi's teaching becomes practical. If you truly understand that what you're seeking is what you are, then the frantic search can end. Not because you've given up, but because you've realized there was never anywhere to go. Stop acting so small, Rumi said. You are the universe in ecstatic motion. This doesn't mean you stop growing or learning or serving. It means you stop the exhausting quest to become what you already are. Instead, you begin to live from what you are. When Rumi met Shams, he thought he was meeting his teacher. But eventually, he realized that Shams was showing him his own nature. Shams is not a person, Rumi would later write. Shams is the sun of consciousness, appearing as a person to awaken the sun of consciousness in me. This is why when Shams disappeared, some say he was murdered by Rumi's jealous disciples. Rumi didn't fall into despair. Instead, he realized something even more profound. Shams had never been outside him. The light that he thought he saw in Shams was his own light, reflected back to him. I searched for God and found only myself. I searched for myself and found only God. But perhaps the most beautiful part of Rumi's discovery is this. Once you realize that God isn't hidden, you begin to see God everywhere, not as a belief or a philosophy, but as a living recognition. Let yourself be silently drawn by the strange pull of what you really love, Rumi advised. It will not lead you astray. That pull, that love, that longing, it's not your personal desire. It's the divine calling the divine home. It's love recognizing itself. It's consciousness awakening to its own nature. This is why Rumi could find God in everything, in wine, in poetry, in music, in dance, in silence, in noise, in joy, in sorrow. Because once you realize that God isn't hidden somewhere else, you realize that God isn't hidden anywhere, not the person reading these words right now. That's not you looking for God. That's God appearing as you, recognizing God appearing as these words, the breath breathing you, the awareness aware of the breath, the space in which both appear, that's not separate from what you've been seeking. That is what you've been seeking. You are born with wings, Rumi reminds us. Why prefer to crawl through life? Those wings aren't something you need to develop or earn or find. They're what you are. You've been flying all along, dreaming that. You're walking, but the dream was never a mistake. Even the forgetting serves the remembering. Even the seeking serves the finding. Even the hiding serves the revealing. God, this is the greatest secret of Rumi. God doesn't hide from you because God can't hide from you. God is the very capacity by which you could recognize God. God is the awareness in which the search for God appears. The beloved is all in all, the lover merely veils him. The beloved is all that lives, the lover a dead thing. When the lover realizes they were always the beloved, the search ends not in finding, but in recognition. You don't find God. You recognize that God was never lost. You don't achieve union. You realize that separation was always imagination. And in that recognition, something amazing happens. Life doesn't end, it begins. But now it's not your life. It's life living itself as the unique expression that appears to be you. This is why Rumi spent the last 30 years of his life in constant celebration. Not because he had found God, but because he had realized that God was never missing. Not because he had achieved union, but because he had recognized that unity was always the case. Dance when you're broken open. Dance if you've torn the bandage off. Dance in the middle of the fighting. Dance in your blood. Dance when you're perfectly free. Why dance? Because when you realize that what you are is pure consciousness, pure love, pure being, how else can you respond but with celebration? The secret Rumi discovered is available to you right now, not as something to believe, but as something to recognize. The awareness reading these words, the presence in which thoughts and feelings appear and disappear, the being that you are before. You tell yourself who you are. That's not separate from what every mystic has ever sought. God isn't hiding in plain sight. God is plain sight. God is the seeing. God is what sees the seeing. And the most beautiful part, this recognition doesn't end the story, it begins it. Because now every moment becomes an opportunity for the divine to know itself anew, to love itself fresh, to discover itself again through the unique perspective that is your life. The search for God ends where it began, with what you are. But now you know it. Now you live it. Now you dance it dot, and in that dance, Rumi's secret becomes yours. What you were looking for was what was looking all along.